Good morning again to everyone, and welcome to the media launch of the Reconstituted National Committee on Reparations. On occasions such as this, I have to say, I feel like hearkening back to the work of Robert Nesta Marley. I know that for most of you, what would immediately come to mind is perhaps what is regarded by some or many as his magnum opus, Redemption Song. Instead, this morning, what I wish to invoke is, I say to you, reparation vibration is positive. And that positivity extends to those of us whose ancestors endured oppression in the past, but who are required to live in the present with its myriad challenges while we anticipate the future. According to the United Nations, victims have a right to reparation. And reparation must be adequate, effective, prompt, and proportional to the gravity of the violation and harm suffered. For CARICOM, reparations is a strategy for achieving our targets of advancement. We believe in our community that reparation rests on a basic philosophy, which is as old as justice itself. It rests not only on an unassailable moral ground, but on ancient and modern precedent. So with those opening remarks, I will now turn to the part of the program where we would listen to the speakers. Our first speaker will be Professor Vereen Shepherd. As I mentioned earlier, Professor Shepherd is the director of the CARICOM Center for Reparation Research. She is a historian by academic training, having obtained her PhD at Cambridge University. She has been involved over several decades in this particular subject matter, and she has served as the chair of Jamaica's National Commission on Reparations. She is also currently a member of the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, on which she actually serves as the vice chair. And she has also authored a number of books that are used at the University of the West Indies and would have been read by perhaps quite a number of those of you present here who would have matriculated at the UWI. Professor Shepherd has been one of this region's leading advocates for reparation at the regional and international level. And I also wish to say that we are indeed very gratified that she was able to travel to Port of Spain, even following the passage of Hurricane Beryl in Jamaica last week. She also suffered some of the devastation of the storm, and it was due to her commitment to this launch today that she traveled to Port of Spain. Of course, I wish to also say at this time, Professor Shepherd, that, of course, I extend my solidarity to you and to all of the people of Jamaica who would have had to face the wrath of Hurricane Beryl and who are now on the road to recovery. And so, with those initial remarks, I will now call Professor Shepherd to the podium to deliver her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your warm welcome, Ambassador. Let me greet Senator the Honorable Dr. Amory Brown, Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Of course, Ambassador Jennifer Marchand, Ambassador of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago to CARICOM, other members of the ministry, including the Permanent Secretary, Dr. Claudius Fergus, Chairman, National Committee on Reparation, and of course, you're an automatic member of the CARICOM Reparation Commission. I greet Mr. Akeem Lopez, member of the TNT NCR, members of the media. It's great to see you out in such numbers. And distinguished brothers and sisters all, thank you for being here. I bring warm greetings from Jamaica, and especially from the University of the West Indies and the staff of the Center for Reparation Research. I'm really thrilled to have been invited to be a part of this media launch of the reconstituted TNT Reparation Committee. I wish the committee all the best. We need to hear your voice. In fact, it is critical that the TNT NCR announces its work to the rest of the region and the world in a more public manner. After all, it was your former Prime Minister, the late Dr. Eric Williams, who provided us with arguably the best blueprint for reparation, especially as we demand this from the United Kingdom. With pushback actually going on right now in the UK to the main theses of Dr. Eric Williams by right-wing elements, we must insist on the rightness of his ideas. This is a flashback to Jamaica that I just left, you know. No, but I can't see. So it's either the PowerPoint or the continuation of my speech. So you have to give them back a little light until we come to the PowerPoint. So can I wait? Good. So I must also say that I'm proud that the government of our region, in fact the governments, the heads of governments of our region, can call on academics from the UWI and other academic institutions to serve on reparation commissions or committees or task forces, we call them different things, in this movement for reparatory justice. And I congratulate Dr. Fergus, because he's a UWI man, and he is now chairman of the current TT NCR. At the start, I brought you greetings from Jamaica. I know that many of you are concerned about the impact of Hurricane Beryl on Jamaica, and we thank you. And again, I thank the ambassador for her kind words. Some areas fared badly. If you know the parishes of St. Elizabeth and Clarendon, then I bring you bad news that they in particular have suffered. One of our oldest high schools, Monroe College, has suffered. Also Hampton, Mannings, and other schools in that area. And several parishes and communities are still without electricity. And I hope my office has now been cleared of the flooding that took place at the regional headquarters in a few of the offices. But the larger point I want to make, as I mentioned the hurricane, is that I hope that we all realize now that it is impossible to examine the present ecological crisis in which we find ourselves right now. Because we are vulnerable small island developing states in the Caribbean, and we have to recall and understand the manner in which we have been subjected to this precarious position. At a joint conference organized by the Center for Reparation Research and Rutgers University, the keynote speaker, Professor Ministerial, reminded us that colonialism is a founding moment of the contemporary climate crisis and was generated by the system of plantation slavery. Therefore, we must intensify our demand for climate reparations. Sheila highlights a suitable climate approach to reparation. And this is what she said. If we were to extend the case for slavery reparations to encompass A, the damage to island environments by plantations and the destitution of populations descended from enslavement, which have left them especially vulnerable to climate change, and B, the role of chattel slavery in the financial foundations of global economies, banks and insurance firms that have directly financed the rise of multinational fossil fuel and mining extractive economies, then we could show that these beneficiaries have exposed the Caribbean to ecological damage, social vulnerability, and high risk from climate extremes, end of quote. This reference to the Joint Climate Reparation Conference that was held at the UWI is a good way of introducing this audience, the media, and the committee to the work of the Center for Reparation Research, which, along with the CARICOM Reparations Commission, are critical allies, Dr. Fergus, to the TNT NCR. Indeed, I want to assure you that the Center for Reparation Research, located at the regional headquarters of the UWI, which you can see actually on the first slide, is the research arm of the CARICOM Reparation Commission, and it stands ready to play its part in terms of responding to the research needs of this committee, as it has been doing for all other committees, as well as globally for reparation advocates and entities. And we also do research for private sector companies, because many people are now realizing that they can't have their tours on plantations without giving access to the people who visit knowledge of the history of those enterprises now. So we're a small center with just 3 staff members. I think you can see that on slide 2. But we are committed to our primary mandate, which is to promote research on and engage in advocacy around the legacies of the conquest and genocidal actions against indigenous peoples, the harm done because of the transatlantic trafficking in enslaved Africans, we no longer say slave trade, and African chattel enslavement, as well as the impact of colonialism and its legacies on the Caribbean. And we help to bring justice and positive transformation to societies affected by these legacies, including on communities affected by deceptive Indian indentureship. As the next slide shows, slide 3, as slide 3 indicates, we carry out our work through building awareness of the crimes of the trafficking in Africans and chattel enslavement. We engage in advocacy for reparation for these crimes. We advance research on the justification for reparation, and we provide research support for all who need our services. Above all, we help to advance the CARICOM 10-point plan for reparatory justice, which is a development plan that aims to address the development needs of the people of our region affected by the trafficking, chattel enslavement, and the legacies of colonialism. Now, you notice that we begin with apology, full formal apology. The only state I know that has used the actual word apology is the Netherlands, the Dutch. Everyone else slides around it by using "we regret," "we are sorry," "it should not have happened," blah, blah, blah. A full formal apology has 3 dimensions, and that's why they slide around it. It accepts responsibility, it commits to non-repetition, and it commits to repair. And it's the repair part of apology that they don't want to admit. And so we have to insist on a full formal apology. And then other things flow from that. The indigenous genocide was real. As historians, we all know about it. And we have to address the psychological pain on our people and so on. The claim being advanced is against any country identified as having sanctioned trafficking and chattel enslavement, or who have been involved in any way in supporting the system. And so far, these, in the next slide, are the countries. Maybe you don't know the flags associated with every country, so I'll tell you. So let's start from the one with the cross, the red. So starting from the top left and going around, Denmark, France, Sweden, and some of you might be surprised at that, but Sweden supplied a lot of the iron that was needed to make chattels and so on. So we're after them. Switzerland, again, a lot of people are surprised, but there's a great researcher in Switzerland called Hans Fassler, who has been feeding us with the information. We have to build links all across the diaspora. And he has written about the role, not only in investments, in the banks and having investments from those who were involved, but that they provided some of the navigational instruments for the ships or the slavers. So, and then Portugal, going around Portugal and the United Kingdom. I'm sure you all know that flag. And beside that, the Netherlands, Germany, Norway, and Belgium. Today, it is all but forgotten, but the participation of the Belgian traders in the trafficking of Africans during the early 1780s was real. And for more on that, Dr. Fergus, you and your committee can read Herman Portocarrero, De Suarte's Handel, and the work of Stan Pannier. I know that we're also in the center now conducting research on the role of Latvia and Poland in Tobago, and those details will be released soon. I mentioned the 10-point plan of the CARICOM Reparation Commission, but just a reminder that while the heads of government of CARICOM prefer a development model, as one of our former prime ministers in Jamaica used to say, it takes cash to care. So calculations are ongoing about the cost of these crimes against humanity. And this next slide shows that the recent calculation by the Brattle Group of Economists in the United States, working with historians, former ICJ Judge Patrick Robinson, and others, is $19 trillion for the CARICOM region from Britain alone. And I think it's $101.4 trillion for the region. And I think the Brattle Group is, even as we speak, updating their calculations. And beside that is the percentage of the, I suppose, the GDP of each country that will be paid out in reparation. Now, the next slide reminds us of the historical injustices committed by Europeans that many are trying unsuccessfully to quantify But those who do the research about such injustices are critical to the advancement of our work. And you can see that the injustices have been described by the DDPA. And of course, your own Dr. Eric Williams' Capitalism and Slavery shows that economic benefits of slavery to Britain were real. So does Professor Hilary Beckles in his Britain's Black Debt. But as the next slide shows, reminds us, Trinidad and Tobago's own Sir Ellis Clarke at a conference on colonialism in 1964 emphasized the injustice of economic extraction and the failure to pay reparation by former and current colonizing powers. And I really believe that this extract should be embraced by all reparation activists. And administering power is not entitled to extract for centuries all that can be got out of a country or a colony, and when that has been done, to relieve itself of its obligations. Justice requires that reparation be made to the country that has suffered the ravages of colonialism before that country is expected to face up to its problems. This is 1964. But even before that, Sir Arthur Lewis, 1939, was telling the world, and Britain in particular, that reparation is due. And in the same year, 1939, if you read Hilary Beckles, how Europe underdeveloped, how Britain underdeveloped the Caribbean, you will see the extract from an MP in the UK, Creech Jones, 1939, who said, it is well known that the squalor in which the Caribbean finds itself is a result of British action, and that something has to be done. We need to use the research that we are doing as evidence to bolster our claim. And if we are in any doubt about the injustices, just pause a minute to view a map of the development of the trafficking and the rapidity with which it developed. And if we need to dim at this point, it's okay. You can put the lights back on, but maybe you can see. I'm going to ask my able assistant to just look at this for a moment. It is very important. It will start slowly, because in the 16th century, ships were not as frequent as in the 19th century. But just be patient, and you will see the increase in the rapidity of the ships flying across to the Americas, carrying our ancestors. This is why we are in the reparation movement. Just be patient. See, as the dates change, the number of ships increase. This is from the LTIS database that is accessible to all of us. But if members don't know how to find it or manipulate it, the Center for Reparation Research will help you. This is further justification for why we do what we do. So I think you get the idea now. But we can send it to anyone who requests. reparation.uwimona.edu.jm. Now, as the Durban Declaration and Program of Action emphasizes, colonialism, and I'm sorry I need to change this one, but as I said, we can send it to those who, yes. So this is the Durban Declaration and Program of Action of 2001, which happened in an atmosphere of disagreement, but the CARICOM region held strong on the issue of reparation. Some people walked out, as we know, some states. And even when we were celebrating the 20th anniversary, some states boycotted the UN activity. But it is very clear from the DDPA that colonialism has truly disfigured us, and the Center for Reparation Research engages in the type of research that brings home what happened to our region historically and what we need to do about it. And Trinidad and Tobago's case must be bolstered by the evidence of the trafficking, and this is also the type of research available to you by the center. Now, slide 11, yes, I'm very sorry, it should have been bigger, but again, it can be circulated. But what this slide shows is the number of Africans scraped up and put on ships, how many ships, and how many arrived alive, and the death rate. And if you look down, you can see Trinidad and Tobago's figures there. And again, that can be made available to you, Dr. Fergus, but as a historian, you may know about it already. But for those who want it, we can circulate, especially to the media. Now, we can never, this is an estimation, by the way. We can never know the exact numbers, but we do have some indication of the scale of the crime. What we do not want you to do is to use the 9 million that has been going on from, Jamaicans would say, from Wapikil Philo. Sometimes we say Philomena, to be gender aware. But we must be outraged at the fact that even after the brutalization of our ancestors through the trafficking and chattel enslavement, at emancipation, it was enslaver compensation, not enslaved people's compensation, as this next slide will show. From what we have gathered from the University College London's database, and the center has manipulated it to show this, the compensation records show that Trinidad planters received just over £1 million sterling at emancipation, which would be, in today's money, about 760 million US dollars. And the current figure for Tobago in today's money would be 174 million. And we keep asking the various banks in our central banks in our region to update that as we go along, because sometimes when they say the current figure, it's from like 2017 or something. I'm sure you could do a lot with that money. And so the return, that's why the return of the compensation money is part of the reparation plan of CARICOM. And it's not only to address historic wrongs that we're demanding reparation, but the contemporary legacies with which we are living. Indeed, in his April 30, 2023 article in the Jamaica Sunday Gleaner, titled From Abuja to Durban, Africa's 30-Year Quest for Reparations, Professor Adekeye Adebayo reminded us that the damage sustained by the African peoples is not a thing of the past. That's why we talk about legacies. But is painfully manifest in the damaged lives of contemporary Africans from Harlem to Harare, in the damaged economies of the black world from Guinea to Guyana, from Somalia to Suriname, and he could have added from Tanzania to Trinidad and Tobago. We stand on the shoulders of those Africans damaged by chattel slavery, by those ancestors damaged by post-slavery harm. And in this regard, we need to sing praise songs to them. I only have a partial list here, starting with the women who bore the brunt of chattel enslavement and who died in fighting for freedom, including Trinidad and Tobago's Abenkina, Luce, Marianne, Eliza, Jeanette, Marguerite, Adelaide Disson, who was called Queen of the 1805 plot in Trinidad. And so these are some of the names of our women fighters. And we must build monuments with their names on them. And when we are tempted to ask why focus so much on these and other women, let us recall Frederick Douglass's justification in this next slide. He said in 1845, when the true history of the anti-slavery cause shall be written, women will occupy a large space in its pages, for the cause of the slave has been peculiarly woman's cause. That was Frederick Douglass. But if the brothers are feeling left out at this moment, let us balance the thing with a sample of the male anti-slavery activists. Some of them are up there. You recognize some of them. So to conclude, let us together continue to build awareness through advocacy, publications, and public education around the lasting and adverse consequences of colonialism in the Caribbean, and offer practical solutions to, I suppose, minimize and or reverse them. I know the TT NCR is already doing this because your work started before this launch, but I can just share with you some of what the CR has done in terms of advocacy and building awareness. And the next slide will show a pictorial survey of some of the things we are doing. We visit schools. We have gone to the Bahamas, and we were here in Trinidad and Tobago last year with over 100 students when we introduced a book for secondary schools on reparation, Introduction to Reparation for Secondary Schools. We work with Maroon communities, and we hosted the chief of the Acampo Maroons in the center, and also the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Indigenous Peoples. And we have hosted reparation advocates in the USA, and we also visited in Dominica, the Kalinago people. So we are out there in the field, not just sitting in the Center for Reparation Research in the comfortable office, well, after the storm, in the regional headquarters. So we know that the TNT NCR, like the Center for Reparation Research and all other NCRs, has a commitment to engage in advocacy and symbolic decolonization, and we wish you well. For example, the work of the Monuments and Memorials Committee must continue, not just here, but in all CARICOM countries. And the person who drove me here drove past a park. I don't know what it's called, but I saw Columbus standing up there. Columbus must fall. In Jamaica, too. He's standing up there in the North Coast. And we want no more physical reminders of Columbus, Queen Victoria, or indeed Milner. And next slide. I was happy to hear about this, you know, when St. Augustine campus changed Milner Hall to Freedom Hall. I don't know if you know anything about Milner, but he was a South African. And he was sent here to learn about tropical agriculture and then to go back to South Africa to, I suppose, teach them how to thief land from black people. Their ideological scars have already disfigured our people, so we said take them down. We must be grounded in a clearly articulated philosophy, firmly located within the context of a commitment to eliminating the impact of conquest, colonial rule, built on racial discrimination, racial superiority, and ethnic hierarchization. In doing our social justice work, we must be guided by the work of our first female professor of history in the UWI system, Guyana's Elsa Govaya. She was wise, and she said, in a region such as ours, where shame about the past too often fills a place that should be built by knowledge, knowledge about the past plays a part in our liberation from the bonds of the past. That's why history education is important. That's why the center does what it does in terms of knowledge production and research for transformation. I wish you well, TNT NCR, with all and all other reparation advocates, campaigners, and activists with whom you're going to form relations, formalized or just individuals doing the right thing. We have the same goal, reparatory justice. I especially ask that we join with those in Africa because our chances of success will be that much greater. At the Africa CARICOM Day on September 7, 2023, and in noting the significance of the observance, Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, Vice Chancellor of the UWI and the Chair of the CARICOM Reparation Commission stated, and I quote, "We are honored as a university community to have the privilege and opportunity to highlight the unity and strength in collaboration between Africa and the Caribbean. We know that the Middle Passage has been described as that enormous chasm that separates Africa from its people, and we are now shrinking that enormous volume of water into a mere trickle because we are reunited. I am proud to be part of an academic institution that shows such leadership on a matter of social justice, joining with civil society on this important cause. Let us all embrace our role, those of us who are intellectuals from the University of the West Indies and other institutions. Let us embrace our role as intellectuals in the service of the Caribbean, Africa, and the diaspora. As Edward Said said, and I close with this, the intellectual is an individual in society who confronts orthodoxy and dogma, who cannot be reduced simply to being a faceless professional, a competent member of a class going about his or her business, but an individual endowed with the faculty for representing, embodying, articulating a message, a view, an attitude, a philosophy or opinion to, as well as for a public. Let us go out there and do what we have to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Shepherd, for your very insightful presentation. I think it could certainly be called a master class in reparations this morning. You have undoubtedly sent the message loudly and clearly to the world. And certainly, I am certain that the members of this audience and even those who are watching on television or online would also see that as CARICOM, we are in fact utilizing all of the talents of people like Professor Shepherd in our region so that the flame of reparations, now we can say it lights all four corners of the globe. Thank you once again, Professor Shepherd. I will now introduce our next speaker, who will be Dr. Claudius Fergus. Dr. Fergus is the chairman of the Reconstituted National Committee on Reparations. He too is a historian, and he was a lecturer in the Department of History at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus, where he served as the head of that department. Dr. Fergus has also written extensively. He has appeared in peer-reviewed academic journals, and he has also authored a number of books. His most recent book, Against Toleration, Britain's Persecution of the Spiritual Baptists, was launched in March 2024, just before Shouter's Liberation Day. Dr. Fergus has conducted extensive research in areas that are relevant to the topic of reparations, and he also hosts a radio program where he endeavors to educate the public on the issue of reparations. So with that introduction, I now wish to call Dr. Claudius Fergus, Chairman of the Reconstituted National Committee on Reparations, to deliver his remarks.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Ambassador Marchand, Honorable Minister, Dr. Avery Brown, and all other protocols observed, fellow citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. I want to first of all thank Professor Vereen Shepherd for that brilliant message that she brought us this morning, and also for the work that her Committee for Reparations and Research has been doing in Jamaica since its foundation. She has been the leader of that center since its foundation. Thank you very much, and we will work along with you in order to advance the cause of reparations. I would be very brief in my presentation. It's difficult to do so as a historian. You're always tempted to engage the historical backgrounds because this is such a massive topic, actually. The CARICOM heads of government decided right here in Port of Spain in July 2013 to establish the CARICOM Reparations Commission with a mandate to pursue reparations for native genocide and African enslavement from all European colonizers of the region, including some whose flags you did not see a short while ago. They later agreed that all member states must establish their own national committee on reparations, and as you heard from Professor Shepherd, they go by different names. In Trinidad and Tobago, it was the National Committee on Reparations, and it held its inaugural meeting on the 15th of April, 2014. Now, that committee's chairman frequently lamented, and he did so very publicly, that he functioned without direction from government from late 2015 to early 2021. But by 2016, more than half of the membership had already fallen off. The surviving members, however, continued to meet regularly with undiminished passion. I want to salute the chair of that committee, Mr. Aigoro Ome, for his steadfast commitment to the cause of reparations and for his selfless service to this country. I also want to pay tribute to the members of his team who persevered with him. These are Dr. Kafra Cambon, who was the former chair of the Emancipation Support Committee, Chief Ricardo Barrett Hernandez, who hosted many meetings of the committee at the Santa Rosa First Peoples Community, their office in Arima. Also National Archivist Ms. Avril Belfond, who also hosted meetings at the National Archives. Mr. De Oni Pianki of the Council of Orisha Elders, Mr. Clyde Noel of All Mansions of Rastafari, and I was also one of those. In February 2021, the government named a new chairperson, but as far as I'm aware, no other members were named. I am therefore the third chair of the National Committee on Reparations, but leading the second committee, the Reconstituted Committee, National Committee on Reparations. which held its inaugural meeting on the 29th of September last year, so less than 10 months in operation. We represent a diversity of civil society organizations and also the public sector, including the Tobago House of Assembly. I want to name the members of my team. On my left, Her Excellency Ambassador Jennifer Machon, Mrs. Zakia Uzoma Wadada, Chief Ricardo Barrett Hernandez, Dr. Charleston Thomas, Mrs. Marlene Saunders Sobers, Mr. Glenroy Halls, we all know him as Bongo Grease, Ms. Attila Springer, Mr. Taharka Obika, Mr. Damian Richardson, and Mr. Akeem Lopez. We are committed to the goals of CARICOM's 10-point plan of action, from formal apology to debt cancellation. You saw the list, so I will not engage in that again, but you saw the list, and it's available online, so you can always download it. But within recent years, the plan has been expanded, not beyond 10, but the ideas have been expanded to include all colonial crimes against humanity perpetrated in the region. As you heard from Professor Shepard, climate change or climate justice, as we might prefer to say. And also, as you heard from her, the elimination of public monuments, place names, and other signage that celebrate those who perpetrated, sanctioned, and benefited from colonial crimes against humanity, not only here, but elsewhere in the world as well. The committee has developed a work plan, and I would just mention some of the items that I would say have a public face to them. In May, we launched our community outreach, and that is part of a wider plan of public education, which will include virtual and mobile exhibitions on reparations. And I'm sure we will be engaging with the Center for Research in order to enrich that particular component of our outreach. We have established a cordial relationship with the THA to pursue our mandate in Tobago. We have established a social media presence with Instagram and Facebook, and those would be further expanded, and we should be communicating with you and you with us. So we want to be interactive on issues of reparations, and we would be doing that also via social media. And this week, we are hosting our first annual National Reparations Week under the theme Reparations for Transformation. So this is day one. It's the launch of the committee, but it is also the introduction to our Reparations Week. Tomorrow's planned event in Tobago has been rescheduled. On Wednesday, Indigenous rights lawyer Caroline Mayer Toby will deliver a public lecture on the title, Exploring Restitution and Reparatory Justice for Native Genocide and Enslavement at the office of the Mayor of Arima, and that's on St. Joseph Road in Arima. On Thursday, we are hosting a virtual youth conference on reparations. Now, the youth is one of our major areas of focus. We don't just want them to be, passive participants. They must become agents as well. So they are going to be managing this conference. It's focused on youth, the respondents are youth, the panelists are youth. And these events are all open to the public. Now, I will conclude by sharing some of my thoughts about why we are so passionate about reparations. Most of us are activists. You heard from Professor Shepard that Milner Hall had been changed or has been changed to Freedom Hall. I was very much at the center of that activism to bring about that change. We were not, however, satisfied with the vague name Freedom Hall. We suggested alternative names, including Henry Sylvester Williams, who was in South Africa when Milner was in South Africa. And he almost got killed. That is Henry Sylvester Williams, who actually lived not far from the university, for fighting against the unjust system of racism, which had now been, grounded. It was now being founded in a sense. It was not yet fully institutionalized, but he was fighting for that, against that system, and he had to run from South Africa. We thought it was the more appropriate name rather than just Freedom Hall. Not that Freedom Hall is not a good name, but we thought that one racist, super racist, should be replaced by a freedom fighter. But I leave that there. Europe's historical crimes of genocide and slavery really cry out for reparatory justice. Natives and Africans were victims of both crimes. Enslavement of natives was institutionalized as encomienda. You would have, of course, read that in your school books. But it was also unregulated chattel slavery. Extreme violence, culture shock, and diseases took its toll. Between 1493 and 1512, that is just a period of over 20 years, the population of Hispaniola dwindled from 1 million to just 20,000. Now that was under private exploitation, predatory, a form of early predatory capitalism. But very soon that was supported by royal authority, the royal authority of Spain. In 1509, the Spanish king issued a proclamation which is translated into English as the Requisition. And that document threatened more genocide and enslavement of the native peoples. It warned them to submit instantly to the authority of the king and the pope. Otherwise, and I quote, "We shall make war against you in all manners and all ways that we can. We shall take you, your wives, and your children, and make slaves of them. And the deaths which shall accrue from this action are your fault." Now, whenever I read that, it really hurts from inside. It's so contemptuous of human life. On the authority of this requisition, slave raids were carried out against the peoples of the Eastern Caribbean, including Tobago and Trinidad. Most of them were taken to Hispaniola to work in the gold mines, in the cotton fields, and the sugar plantations, which were just beginning to emerge. Others were taken to Margarita to die for pearls, and where many of them died. The genocidal marriage between king and pope, however, had begun much earlier in 1455, when Pope Nicholas V issued what was called a papal bull that condemned West Africans as children of Satan and instructed the Portuguese king to capture them and reduce them to chattel slavery. Now, what was the result of that? We call it the MAFA, or the African Holocaust. Over 15 million Africans died in Africa because of Europe's insatiable demand for African labor in this part of the world. Over 3 million died aboard the slave ships. Of course, I wouldn't engage Professor Shepard, but sometimes, we still have to use the word slave ship conveniently. But she is quite right. This wasn't a trade. It was human trafficking. And in the English-ruled colonies alone, of the 3 million Africans that landed between 1640 and 1808, only 500,000 saw emancipation in 1838. We're talking genocide as well. Reparation for genocide and enslavement of native peoples is the natural culmination of the struggle against colonialism and neocolonialism. And you heard our own former president, Clark, and you saw the quotation. So they were aware of this. Unfortunately, we are still caught up almost, at the beginning of the struggle. It has been a long struggle. We stand on historical truth. We stand on the authority of international law. And we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors, and I want to name one of them, Otoba Koguano, who was enslaved in Grenada and emancipated in England. And he, as far as I'm aware, made the first case for reparation for the enslavement of Africans and the slave trade as early as 1787. We also stand on the shoulders of our elders, but these are too many to mention. So you can see the struggle has been ongoing for almost 250 years. We will not allow those who oppressed us to deter us or to decide what is justice for the crimes that they have committed against us. Thank you, and I refer back to our Master of Ceremonies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fergus. You know, we all remember that David Rudder said, you know, by Calypso stories are told, and certainly as a historian, you will be aware that the pages of history reveal the struggle of our people. And following those remarks by Dr. Fergus, our next speaker will be Senator the Honorable Dr. Amory Brown, Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs. I now call Dr. Brown, Minister Brown, to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Ms. Rita Toussaint, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, and Head of the Foreign Service. Her Excellency Jennifer Marchand, Ambassador to the Caribbean Community. Ms. Neela Ram Atwaru, Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs. Professor Vereen Shepherd, Director, CARICOM Center for Reparations Research. Dr. Claudius Fergus, Chairman, Reconstituted National Committee on Reparations. Distinguished members of the National Committee on Reparations, and I thank you all for joining us here for this media launch. Members of the media, staff of the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, good morning to each and every one of you. And as they say in Ghana, Akwaba, welcome to this launch. Let me begin by sharing a quotation with you. And the quote is this: all of us here today, the genuine representatives of the Caribbean, with a common history based on the Caribbean Trinity, colonialism, monoculture with its polyethnic labor force, and racism, are the symbols of fragmentation. There can be no new dispensation which does not mean the integration of the fragmented economies of the people of the Caribbean, by the people of the Caribbean, for the people of the Caribbean. All of us here today, with a common history, are the symbols of fragmentation. There can be no new dispensation which does not mean the integration of the fragmented people of the Caribbean, by the people of the Caribbean, for the people of the Caribbean. Those words were taken from a speech delivered by Dr. Eric Eustace Williams on July 4th, 1973, 51 years ago, at the signing of the Treaty of Chaguaramas. In those words, Dr. Williams skillfully identified aspects of the historical development of Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean community which are central to the reparations agenda. In my capacity as the line minister for the National Committee on Reparations, I wish to extend a sincere and warm welcome to this media launch of the committee taking place at the National Academy for the Performing Arts in Port-of-Spain. At this time, I wish to acknowledge Professor Vereen Shepherd from our CARICOM sister state of Jamaica, and to express Trinidad and Tobago's heartfelt condolences to and solidarity with Jamaica, as well as other member states severely impacted by Hurricane Beryl. The disastrous effects of this hurricane have left us all shocked and saddened as we attempt to come to terms with the devastation, including the number of lives lost in the region. And by extension, I thank the Trinidad and Tobago Society for being so generous to our brothers and sisters in need. Friends, permit me at the onset to reiterate my satisfaction that we have reached this particular juncture. The government of Trinidad and Tobago's reconstitution of the National Committee on Reparations demonstrates commitment to aligning ourselves with the decision of CARICOM heads to re-establish national committees on reparations that have been dormant, to re-establish those committees, and to establish national committees where they have been non-existent. This is the case because national committees are vital. National committees are essential strands in the region's reparations tapestry as we weave a path toward truth, justice, and reconciliation. In July 2013, CARICOM heads unanimously decided to establish the CARICOM Reparations Commission, comprising the chairmen of the respective national committees on reparations, and the latter were envisioned as strategic collaborators in the global reparations movement. I'm very proud that we have the distinguished Dr. Claudius Fergus as our contribution to this strategic collaboration. As Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, I have supported and contributed to our Caribbean communities' deployment of advocacy and diplomacy, as many have collectively advanced the global reach of the reparations agenda, and I fully appreciate the need for sustained coordination in this regard. At the level of CARICOM, we have deliberated and agreed on a broad strategy aimed at informing a wide range of initiatives to advance the reparations movement. This strategy involves working assiduously to expand the network of allies and to constrict the circles of those who are opposed to reparations. To constrict the circle of those who are opposed to reparations. And if you think there are not those who are opposed to reparations, then you need to think again. The crimes against humanity of native genocide, the transatlantic trafficking of enslaved Africans, and the radicalized system of chattel slavery demand historical justice. As a consequence of strategic efforts to achieve this, I can say that our community, the Caribbean community, is widely regarded as an important nucleus of the reparations movement, with chain reactions triggered across the globe. We recognize that a strategic advocacy process with an underlying international, regional, and national component is essential in order to secure reparations from the governments of all the former colonial powers and from related institutions of those countries to the nations and people of the Caribbean community that were severely affected, that are severely affected. To that end, specific diplomatic proposals continue to be formulated, instituted, and implemented at various levels. There have been some very positive developments on the reparations agenda. In December 2020, the International Day for People of African Descent was proclaimed to be marked on August 31st of each year. And the following year, the United Nations Permanent Forum on People of African Descent was officially launched. At the plenary session of the UN General Assembly in 2023, our Prime Minister, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, and other CARICOM heads were joined by President Nana Akufo-Addo of Ghana in making strong statements on reparatory justice. This was 2023 at the UN General Assembly. Moreover, CARICOM intends to participate in the work of the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, the UN Working Group of Experts on People of African Descent, and the UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. It would be remiss of me if I did not recognize once again the presence of the Vice Chair of the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination and the Director of the Caribbean Center for Reparations Research, Professor Shepard. Professor Shepard, you shared many things with us today, but that slide tracking the actual movement of the trafficking ships from east to west across the Atlantic Ocean was powerful, emotional, and needs to be shared with the wider public time and time again. There has been increased cooperation with the African continent, with the countries of the African continent and the people of Africa in several areas, particularly reparations, as a result of the first Africa CARICOM Summit of Heads of Government, which was held 3 years ago. That summit agreed to designate the 7th of September every year as Africa CARICOM Day to celebrate the strengthened relationship between the two regions. And since September 2022, Afro-Caribbean Trade and Investment Fora have been held in Barbados, Guyana, and the Bahamas. And in November 2023, Ghana hosted the Accra Reparations Conference. CARICOM heads proposed to place more emphasis on direct engagement, advocacy, and negotiations, including strengthening partnerships with the African Union. And I'm very pleased that the chair of our own Reparations Committee and another member were able to attend that Ghana conference. Friends, in our hemisphere, through the community of Latin American and Caribbean states, Trinidad and Tobago has welcomed the expression of profound regret and acknowledgement of the untold suffering of millions of men, women, and children as a result of the transatlantic trafficking of enslaved Africans, and the expression of support for the rights of indigenous people as set out in the Declaration of the European Union CELAC Summit, held in July 2023. There was also the operationalization of a technical working group on Afro-descendants and the implementation of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People and the American Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, as well as the International Decade of Indigenous Languages. And I'm glad Chief Barrett is here. You realize that the issue, the plight, the history, the injustice to indigenous populations is very much a core part of the reparations movement. Some other important developments include the apologies from the government of the Netherlands, the Church of England, and some prominent families in the United Kingdom for their roles in the enslavement of Africans, and the February 2024 decision of CARICOM heads to seek inclusion of the reparations on the agenda of the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, which will be held in October 2024 in Samoa. I see the upcoming CHOGM, Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, as an important milestone on our quest to mainstream the reparations conversation and agenda into all available multilateral fora. It is imperative that Trinidad and Tobago and our CARICOM partners leverage all available channels and speak with one voice on the issue of reparatory justice, including the deployment of our overseas missions to be actively engaged and playing a role in educating our diaspora. I see my good friend, sometimes based in the United States, is present at this media launch as well, and to influence public opinion in the host countries of our diaspora. In tandem with our diplomatic strategy, our region has decided to explore legal options that have the potential to further the reparations cause. And in 2023, CARICOM heads of government endorsed a proposal to establish the CARICOM African Union Joint Legal Committee to advance a collaborative agenda and common approach to reparatory justice. So this cause is moving into the courtroom as well, with the deployment of international law. Integral to this initiative is the establishment of a CARICOM Legal Advisory Committee on reparations. And I know we have Dr. Fergus, a young lawyer, as well on our national committee, and it is my hope that his work would feed into that legal advisory committee. These legal bodies will be tasked with the responsibility to research and develop an effective legal strategy. My friends, the world has changed and is today a vastly different place, even when compared to the 1960s, during which a period of sweeping nationalism launched the journey of independence for many of us. Today's international environment is marked by polycrises, and the creeping rise of radical nationalism is breeding discontent and disunity in troubled, far-flung places such as Western Europe and North America. This simmering discontent has given rise to fresh intolerance, refreshed racism, and neo-xenophobia, with a proliferation of hate crimes and tensions, such as the international environment, and the backdrop against which all CARICOM states are required to surmount many obstacles that lie in our path as we strive together to achieve reparatory justice. And of course, we must pursue this important agenda together. Now, there's ample precedent for the concept of reparations. I'll give just a few brief examples. During World War II, over 120,000 Japanese Americans were imprisoned in concentration camps. Over 120,000 Japanese Americans were imprisoned in concentration camps, not in Poland or Germany, but in the United States of America. The 1988 Civil Liberties Act led to the issuance of checks and letters of apology, to over 80,000 survivors in the amount of $20,000 US each. If you're good at maths, as I am not, you can calculate that that amounts to over 1.6 billion US dollars, or 11 billion TT dollars. An intelligent audience should require no comparatives between the difficult 4 or so years of imprisonment in the hysteria after Pearl Harbor to the 340 years and more during which over 15 million sons and daughters of Africa lost their lives, shattered by a largely European system which enslaved bodies and separated human beings from everything they had ever known, and converted their blood and sweat and tears into wealth and development of lovely first world nations that some of us visit and admire and photograph. Those noble castles and sturdy bridges and orderly cobbled streets and swollen treasuries were built from the bones and bodies of my foreparents and your ancestors. Another example comes from Germany, whose Nazi regime killed and imprisoned about 6 million Jews, with the keen participation of several other nations in Europe. After World War II, the German government and many German banks and financial institutions paid billions of dollars to survivors during the German reparations program from 1952. 89 billion US dollars was paid to survivors and to the State of Israel over a period of several decades. The keen observer would note that these historical examples of reparations payments do not include any persons of African descent. One good day, I will tell the story of some of the reactions I have gotten as Minister of Foreign Affairs from some senior representatives of Western European countries, including one outgoing administration, to even the concept of reparations for the enduring damage and injustice of transatlantic slavery. Those types of reactions tell me this: we need more shoulders to the wheel. We need more shoulders to the wheel. We need to work smarter. We need to focus our energies not on fighting each other or ganging up on each other, but on a concerted, evidence-based, multi-layered, effective advocacy, diplomacy, persuasion, and pressure. Don't want to say too much on this today, but we also have to take into account the 1783 edict of the King of Spain, known as the Cedula of Population. And I suspect Dr. Fergus has a lot to offer in such regard as well. In the end, reparations is not just about the past, but it's also about the future. It is about justice. Very recently, I was part of a delegation led by the Prime Minister that visited Ghana, and in particular visited Otumfuo Nana Osei Tutu II. Discovered many things on that particular visit, including some initial delight that the British government had returned, and I use that word advisedly, a wide range of gold artifacts which were plundered and taken from Africa to London, only to discover, to our dismay, by the description of Otumfuo himself, that these gold artifacts were not returned as they should have been, but were loaned back to his kingdom. They were loaned back to his kingdom temporarily. Needless to say, we discussed a strategy to treat with that issue. My friends, many of today's descendants from the era of slavery are not too hard to identify. African DNA is powerful DNA. Sadly, we are also surrounded by institutions and constructs that have also descended from slavery. We are also surrounded by institutions and constructs that have descended from slavery as an institution and slavery as a mindset. These sometimes are more difficult to spot and to treat with. And in the modern age, you will find some who will speak glibly and frequently about breaking shackles of colonialism, while at the same time pursuing an agenda designed still to exploit the sweat and blood of those whose foreparents were enslaved. This is the thinking. Black people can't lead anything good. Black people can't lead anything good. That thinking is the direct legacy of Jim Crow and Christophorus Columbus. And reparations must treat with that and take that into account. Of course, we must pursue this important agenda, located as we are in a multi-ethnic, mixed society in which there are many potential allies. We must pursue this important agenda, located as we are in a multi-ethnic, beautiful, mixed society in which there are many potential allies. While colonialism's construct was based on those who had power and those who seemingly were powerless, the legacy of colonialism has also given us the presence of different cultures alongside each other. In our quest for reparations, we must remain mindful of our purpose since independence to forge beyond the diverse places of origin of those who endured oppression, new sources of power, new sources of strength and development. We extend a hand of brotherhood to men and women of goodwill everywhere. Everywhere. In the end, the buy-in of the media is essential for the success of the reparations agenda. Finally, I wish to thank all of you for your attendance at this media launch of the Reconstituted National Committee on Reparations, and to state that your presence today and the keen participation of the media sends a strong promise of hope for the committee's work going forward. I wish, therefore, to extend every good wish to the distinguished chairman and all the members of the Reparations Committee for future success. I thank you for your commitment. I thank you for your wisdom. I thank you for your endurance. And I also thank those who preceded you in the local reparations work. Thank you, and best wishes, and full support to these important endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. And just to close off this part of the program, I would just wish at this time to express gratitude to the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs and to the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs for the work that was done in terms of putting together this event, because support was required across several divisions of the ministry, and that was enthusiastically given, as is the norm in the institution. I also wish to thank specifically our three speakers this morning. They all explored themes, they shared ideas and perspectives, which I am certain, I am confident, gave all of us a greater understanding of the topic of reparations. And lastly, I wish to express gratitude to the guests, for we all must be united by a common purpose in the furtherance of the reparations agenda. And so with that, this concludes this aspect, this portion of the program, and we are prepared to open the floor if there are any questions from any members of the media who happen to be present here at the moment. Okay, I'm seeing no questions, no arms raised at the moment. And so I trust that all that was said was very well understood, and we expect, am I seeing your hand raised there, sir? There's a microphone. There's a microphone. And could you please say your name and the organization you represent and which of the three speakers you are addressing?
Okay, my name is Colin Williams. I live out in New York City, and the organization that I have founded didn't realize it was an organization, but the recognition of Dr. Eric Williams and his work. I've been doing it for the past 20 years. But I would like to know, and thank you to the Office of the Government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Caribbean Affairs for seeing this committee of reparation very important and giving your effort to, I guess, to revamp this organization to make sure it happens. And we'd like to know, is this event going to be showed later on YouTube or to the schools on Trinidad and Tobago and to the region so the younger generation could know how important our work is towards freedom, not just in the Caribbean, but how essential it was to the freedom of all African people around the world. Of capitalism and slavery, which is actually the blueprint for reparation. Thank you.
The Minister will respond. Thank you for the question.
Okay. Thank you very much, Brother Williams. I appreciate the question. Thank you for your presence here. And thank you for the work that you have been doing in furtherance of the legacy of our first Prime Minister. Absolutely, the media, that is really the philosophy behind media launch, and I want to thank those who conceptualized this approach. I'm very pleased that the media is here in large numbers to capture this event. My understanding is that the sentiments, the messages, the speeches, and hopefully at least some of the slides will be shared with the nation via the traditional news channels. Fortunately, on the committee, we have a media representative as well, who brings vast experience, but who also brings that connection to the possibilities of social media. The chairman himself identified there's already work taking place on the social media front to ensure that the messages, the reparations agenda is sufficiently availed to the population, including young people. There's specifically a youth representative as well. So even in your question, we are hearing a clear recommendation with respect to the interface with school children, and not just in a general sense, but including the product coming out of this particular event this morning. So thank you very much for the question and the recommendation. I assure you this will be pursued assiduously. I don't know if the chairman may wish to add anything he may.
Thank you for your question. And of course, we have our media person here. But in addition to that, we need to work with the conventional media. We need you. For example, what comes out of this forum this morning would also be on your social media platforms as well. So whatever events you cover, and we hope you cover our events as well. So we are inviting you to a REMA on Wednesday. All of the media personnel present here, we are inviting you to that event on Wednesday, beginning at 5 o'clock at the mayor's office. We hope that you're there, and even though we are online on Thursday, we hope you have some means of covering that as well. definitely clips of this event this morning, this launch, would be managed by our media representative, and we would be also engaging in our social media that we are working on, we're still working on, to ensure that all events like this are captured and communicated not only to the Trinidad and Tobago community, but the regional community. We work with the CRC. Whatever we do, we share with the wider CARICOM reparations community and the wider community of peoples of the region as well. So we thank you for your concern, but we really need you to work with us in order to advance the cause of reparations. Thank you.
Okay. Professor Shepherd.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is not exactly in line with the responses, because those responses are best given by Dr. Fergus and you, Minister. But I don't want us to leave here without mentioning Haiti. I think when we talk about historic reparation, we tend to think in terms of Europeans paying reparation to those harmed in one way or the other. And you outlined that very well, Minister. But I think we need to add, when we're talking about reparation payments, we need to add the fact that Haiti had to pay reparation to France. And I think we have to make that a part of our advocacy to demand back the modern equivalent of that. We have to also change the ways in which we think about our sister nation. Haiti should be a beacon to all those who are talking about freedom historically and what that meant for the people of the region. And I want to remind all of us that once they fought and won their freedom, Haiti did not just rest on its laurels, it offered freedom to all enslaved Africans who could reach their shores. They got citizenship and freedom. So let us keep Haiti in our thoughts constantly, praise them for what they did, and also don't just leave them in history, but try to understand what's going on there today and why it is going on there today. And Jamaica, for example, must be the enslaved Africans of Jamaica who stowed away on a boat, reached Haiti. The boat was called Deep Nine. You can read about it. And the enslaver from whom they escaped kept demanding back his property from President Pétion. Actually, I think he reached Haiti to ask for his property, and President Pétion showed him the boat. That's your property, you can take it. But there are no people in this country who have the status of property. They are Haitian citizens. Let's not forget that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I also just wanted to add that, in fact, our program went live on TTT. We in the ministry had also sent out notification to all of Trinidad and Tobago's overseas missions so that they could tune in online. And the ministry will be working with the information division regarding future posting of the video online. So I would also just like to offer that information. So I think with that, I don't see any more questions, and I think we have reached the end of our program. I recall when I spoke with Professor Shepherd earlier, she had indicated that she wished to present a book. Yes, so she's coming to present a publication.
Thank you for having me, and I want to give back something for this honor. You heard me say the Center for Reparation Research engages in research and publication. So this is one of the efforts of the center. It's a special collection of the social and economic studies, and all the essays are on reparation by leading scholars. So I thought I'd make a presentation, because I know the ministry is the land ministry for reparation, and you have done a wonderful job of organizing this event. And so I'd like to present to you. You want us to go for? Okay. On behalf of the Center for Reparation Research. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, I think we have come to the end of our program. Thank you very much once again to everyone for coming, to our speakers. And I would now say to all of you that there are some light refreshments just outside of the room. So I encourage you.
This is TTT, Live for Local.